Welcome back to my KEEPUP channel. Richard Madeley and Nigel Farage clash in fiery debate on GMB over ex-UKIP leaders claim growing number of young Muslims do not subscribe to British values. Nigel Farage clashed with Richard Madeley today as the Good Morning Britain host challenged his controversial comments on Muslims by asking, "What on earth were you talking about?" The Reform UK honorary president provoked a backlash on Sunday when he warned of the growing number of young people in this country who do not subscribe to British values and loathe much of what we stand for. He later clarified he was talking about Muslims. Mr. Madeley challenged the former UKIP leader on his comments this morning by quoting the findings of a major review of the existing polling carried out in 2018 by Ipsos Mori. They found absolutely conclusively that Muslims in the UK attach more importance on being British than the general population, he said. 85% feel they truly belong to Britain, 55% feel that their national identity as British is very important to them, and that compares to 44% of the general population. So I'm bound to ask, what on earth were you talking about there? In response, Mr. Farage said he wanted to provide context about what he said on Sunday in an interview with Trevor Phillips on Sky News. He said, "What I said is that a growing number of young people do not subscribe to British values. In fact, despise them in many ways. And all of your viewers would have seen the local elections where in parts of our inner cities we saw sectarian politics, people voting purely on religious lines, councillors getting elected and screaming Allahu Akbar." He then quoted recent polling by JL Partners, commissioned by the Henry Jackson Society. It showed that 23% of 18 to 24-year-old young Muslims living in Britain think that jihad is a good thing, Mr. Farage said. Now that of course is not a British value in any way at all, and it's a very disturbing trend that's particularly prevalent among the young. Mr. Madeley replied, "The poll that you just quoted from has been very heavily criticized as self-selecting. People were basically drawn in through a series of clicks, and by the time they were asked to register their opinion they had already made their minds up. You also said in the interview that you could take someone to a particular street in Oldham and there would be nobody there who speaks English. Well, again, that's just not true. The Office of National Statistics say that only 0.7% of people in Oldham don't speak English. That's less than 1 in 100. Mr. Farage said it was possible to argue about numbers and statistics, but it was undoubtedly true that there is an increasing number of young people in Britain who don't only not subscribe to our values, they openly support Hamas. Steve Baker became the latest Tory minister to challenge Mr. Farage's comments as ignorant and offensive. Mr. Baker said in a social media post this morning, "It is not right that good British people should be slandered like this, and I will defend them." The Wickham MP praised the contribution of British Muslims in his Buckinghamshire constituency, where he is seeking to defend a 4,000-vote majority at the general election. "I am proud that in Wickham, British Muslims are councillors, mayors, council chairs and parliamentary candidates, justices of the peace and the present High Sheriff of Buckinghamshire," Mr. Baker added. "They are teachers and head teachers, doctors and pillars of our society. These are my colleagues, friends and supporters, and I am glad. They deserve much better than to be the object of this clear and intolerable bigotry. This is why I have always fought Islamophobia and why I will continue to do so, supporting the creation of a practical definition." Mr. Farage, who has decided not to stand in the general election for his Reform Party, mentioned Muslims while commenting on Rishi Sunak's plans to revive national service for 18-year-olds, which he called a joke. Mr. Farage added, "It's totally impractical. The army has shrunk from 100,000 to 75,000 in 14 years of conservatism. And most interestingly, we have a growing number of young people in this country who do not subscribe to British values. In fact, loathe much of what we stand for." Challenged over who he was referring to, Mr. Farage replied, "Oh, I think we see them on the streets of London every Saturday." Pressed on whether he was referring to Muslims, he added, "We are." Mr. Farage doubled down on his comments during a speech this morning by claiming the UK is moving into sectarian politics with women completely excluded. Speaking in Dover, he said, "I think what we ought to be doing with this situation here is declaring a national security emergency, and this is an emergency." I talked over the course of the weekend to Trevor Phillips about the small but worryingly growing number of young men, predominantly young men in this country, adopting radical views, Views that aren't just un-British, but views that frankly are extremely anti-British. He added, "You might have noticed that Angela Rayner yesterday was campaigning in her constituency, begging a group of Muslim leaders to please vote Labour. You will have noticed not a single woman in the room. So we're moving into an age in our inner cities and towns, I'm worried to say, of sectarian politics with women completely excluded." The campaigner also accused Mr. Sunak of calling an early general election because flights to Rwanda will not take off. He said, "I am absolutely convinced that the overriding reason for calling a snap early general election is because he knows those planes in July, as he promised, would not be going to Rwanda. They weren't going to go. Rishi can't stop the boats." Source: mirror.co.uk. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.